Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the gentlewoman yielding me the customary 30 minutes. I yield myself such time as I may consume and ask unanimous consent that I may attach extraneous materials to this part of my speech, since we only have 30 minutes on two legislative matters.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. At a time when millions are struggling to find work, the majority has decided that their top priority, one of the first 10 bills of the session that they get to number, is to continue the decades-long assault on a woman's constitutionally protected right to choose. Before I go any further, let me be clear. This bill is a hoax. Federal taxpayers are not spent on abortion. This has been true for more than 3 decades. And under the Hyde Amendment, the use of federal dollars to pay for abortions is flatly prohibited, except in the cases of rape or incest or when the life of the mother is endangered. Thus, despite what the majority may claim, H.R. 7 is not a solution to a problem, but a poorly, thinly veiled attempt to chip away at Obamacare and women's reproductive rights. Another battle in the war against women. H.R. 7 is a reflection of a majority out of touch with the American people and struggling to understand the fundamental truths about reproductive health, and we really mean struggle. The extreme legislation was originally sponsored by a man, originated from a subcommittee composed of 13 men, was passed out of the Judiciary Committee with the votes of 21 Republican men. This has been the problem for a long time. Men in blue suits and red ties determining what women can and should do when it comes to their own health. One such Republican man declared that, quote, a wife is to voluntarily submit to her husband in a book that he recently wrote. Another has declared, this is a new one, this is not the one from last election, quote, the incidence of rape resulting in pregnancies are very low. In other words, Madam Speaker, the men who are making these decisions simply don't know what they're talking about. And meanwhile, a Republican man on the Judiciary Committee recently said today's legislation is good for reducing the unemployment numbers because having new children brought into the world is not harmful to job creation. It very much promotes job creation for care and services and so on that need to be provided for a lot of people to raise children. Unfortunately, the hypocrisy of that statement is it comes from a majority that staunchly opposes increasing any funding for pre-K education or paid sick leave for working parents, and the same majority cutting nutritional benefits for the working poor under the Farm Bill that we will consider tomorrow. Such a hypocritical and mean-spirited agenda reminds me of another quote from former Congressman Barney Frank, who once famously said that the anti-choice legislators, quote, believe that life begins at conception but ends at birth, end quote. In other words, once it's born, they don't want to have anything to do with it. In looking at the majority's legislative priorities, it is almost impossible to disagree. Madam Speaker, a new poll shows that 64% of Americans agree that decisions on abortion should be made by a woman and her doctor. The government should never have gotten into the business of being between the woman and her doctor or anyone else she wants to consult. Only 24% say that government has a right and obligation to pass restrictions on abortion. Now, perhaps that's why the majority is passing H.R. 7 on the same day as the State of the Union, because we know it's not going anywhere. We know that the Senate will not take this up, and if by some strange set of events it should pass the Senate, which it won't, the President would never sign it. But anyway, we bring it up on the same day as the State of the Union, rushing it through Congress to make some kind of point to some people somewhere before they leave on a weekend retreat and making one rule to consider 2 drastically different bills, even though we would have had plenty of time to have had 2 rules here. Now, included under today's rule, as we said, is the conference report on the Farm Bill, a major piece of legislation that impacts all aspects of the economy. Surely it deserves a full and open debate before its final passage. Instead, the majority is proposing another closed and House rule-breaking process, because we've not had time to read it. And then this will also be their 100th closed rule since taking control in 2011, and allowing just an hour of general debate for each bill and 15 minutes basically on the rule on our side of the House. If one wonders at the lack of productivity from this Congress, just look at the closed and partisan legislative process pursued by the majority, and you will quickly understand. Madam Speaker, with all the major issues facing our country, attacking women's health care shows just how extreme and extremely out of touch the Washington Republicans are, because the Republicans at home don't feel that way. We should be passing legislation to create jobs, to grow our economy, and to level the playing field for working women, not taking the country backwards with bills that attack women's rights. I urge my colleagues to vote no on today's rule and the underlying legislation, and I ask unanimous consent to insert the following background material in the record, which you have given me, and I thank you, and I will reserve the balance of my time.